Hello, everyone, and welcome to the end of day two of our Zero Trust Summit. Hope you've enjoyed yourself over the last 2 days. I know I have learned quite a few things from some of my colleagues in the industry. Before I forget, I'd love to remind everyone that all of these sessions, if you've registered, are going to be available online afterwards. So if you missed a session or you just want to go back and review something that was previously said, all of these videos are going to be made available to you very shortly. With that, I have the honor of being your last speaker of the day. And with that, I would love to take a moment to speak about the future of where I see Cloud Security Alliance working on zero trust initiatives that really complement some of our other programs, in particular our AI safety initiative, as well as our compliance automation revolution efforts, and of course, our STAR program with its frameworks. So with that, when I start to think about zero trust, I really am surprised of how well this has aged. I feel like it is the Benjamin Buttons, if people are familiar with the book or the movie starring Brad Pitt. This really is a story of a philosophy that has not aged, but gotten stronger and better over time. I recall the first few moments of hearing from John Kinderwagen, his excitement of explaining to me this term that he had coined for zero trust and what it meant. He always says that he was a recovering PCI assessor. And of course, at this time, I was leading the PCI standards, PCI Council. And so he explained to me where he saw the future of really managing more granularly the access and identification of accounts for protecting certain types of data. Now, when I think of this, and I think of back 15 years ago when John and I had that conversation at an RSA conference, so much has changed in cloud computing. We didn't have large language models so freely accessible to the world. And I think at that time, we were looking at zero trust and a really human scale capabilities, right? We had admins that were approving access requests one at a time. We had security analysts reviewing alerts and policies that honestly were changing quarterly, biannually, not at the pace of maybe weekly or daily or hourly that they are today. And of course, we didn't have as much non-human identification as well, or non-human identities. So I think we look at that and the early days of zero trust, we have to realize that the attacks that we are trying to prevent are still there today, but they've really become more sophisticated. Adversaries are now being able to bypass some of these trust boundaries that we've built decades very carefully so that they would not get through our defenses. But these large language models are being able to craft some very sophisticated phishing lures. AI tools are being able to help automate reconnaissance. So they're being able to create and identify more easily the attack surface against your environment. And they're using self-mutating malware. So it's being able to recompile and reconfigure and do things that really circumvent these traditional controls. So as our security teams are no longer able to process and operate exclusively at human speed, I do think that we are going to find more use of AI and automation, sometimes together. And we will still need that human judgment, of course, but we have to have the augmentation with machine speed detection and the response that is required. And that's going to be that core competency that I think leveraging AI in our AI safety initiative at CSA with Zero Trust and the working group efforts and the research that they're building. And that's going to be able to, for us to keep pace with what we're actually defending. Another program, and I mentioned it earlier, is our CAR, Compliance Automation Revolution. I think this program is also going to really bolster what we mean by real-time reporting and being able to monitor against these type of threats. So if you're not familiar, this is going to be using machine language, looking at our frameworks and finding ways that those controls are truly living up in real time to the expectations of how they were originally implemented, and be able to, from that, also gauge and collect data that will tell us the return on the investment, what controls are providing the most value for our environments, because they're not always necessarily equal. So I'm very excited about the CAR program going forward. The other thing I want to mention is thinking about how this AI the models, the agents, how they're going to complement a zero trust philosophy within your organization. Now, when I think about a really mature zero trust implementation, it's going to be generating enormous amounts of telemetry. That's going to be signals from identity providers, the endpoint agents, network flows, the cloud control plane, application logs, even the data plane, and other types of the access to that data plane. So I think all of these things, there's so much information that if we're not doing this in a very controlled manner, we're going to end up with not a data lake, but something that looks more like a data swamp. So I think AI is going to be part of that solution, not all of it, but it's going to be part of it. It's going to allow for this machine learning and advanced analytics. It's going to take and turn raw telemetry into some operational insights that maybe we don't have today. And now these models are going to be able to cluster behaviors. They're going to be able to identify more quickly outliers to expectations. They're going to be able to detect subtle change in access patterns that humans might be able to or might miss. And particularly across larger populations of users and workloads, just that volume, that is going to be something that we're going to see real value in AI. We did a recent survey at CSA, if you're not familiar, of comparing security analysts that were using AI to complement their work and those that were just doing their traditional detection and manual practices. And we found that there was a consistent amount of improvement when people were these SOC analysts were leveraging AI as part of that. And I think that's just going to be inherent for everything that we look at going forward. Speaking of the dynamic attributes, I think AI is also going to move us from these predefined policies to more adaptive policies that evolve with the environment. Instead of writing these one size fit all rules, which have been even within zero trust sometimes applied, you can also see that we're going to be able to adjust thresholds. We're going to be able to recommend, or the AI rather, is going to recommend new segmentation rules that might be better than what we thought was the best approach. We're going to see some trigger step-up authentication, where I think risk scoring is going to be truly more dynamic and probably more accurate going forward. And so, in other words, I think zero trust is going to tell us, what to check and to constrain. So AI can advise us on more quickly on what those if those constraints should be tightened or relaxed based on real-time behavior. Also, for anomaly detection, I think AI models can learn what normal looks like, possibly more easily in less time than it requires for some human training, and be able to look at flag deviations. And I think this is going to be really interesting and important. I haven't seen a lot of research in here, but I'd love to see it around insider threats and looking at those and compromised identities and looking at some of the internal activity, whether it's within a SOC or elsewhere within an organization, and look at maybe some very subtle misuse of privileges and being able to identify things that may have gone on undetected before. So overall, I think the last thing I'll just mention is just the predictive blast radius. AI, I think, is going to help us contain those blast radius a lot better and prevent a potential incident. I think they're going to understand the typical data flows, the dependencies between the systems, and the normal access paths, and they're going to be able to predict, what these identities and what the workload is and whether or not it's been compromised. So lastly, I know I've gone a little over my time, but I appreciate your patience with me. I really want to emphasize some of the good work that the Zero Trust working groups have done. It's really unfair of myself to maybe highlight only a few of those works, but I wanted to make a few that I think are relevant to the conversation around AI and resiliency. One is the paper that's out for public review, using Zero Trust to secure enterprise information in a LLM environment. The second is one that is their zero trust guidance for resilient enterprise environments. That is being done in collaboration with the Working Group 9, as well as 1 and 2, as well as there's a financial service element to it. So our Financial Service Leadership Committee, which Eric Johnson and myself lead, they have assisted with getting some more perspective from a financial service lens. And then also what's been published this fall that I think is very relevant, defining the zero trust protect surface, zero trust privacy assessments and guidance, as well as the analyzing logs with AI models. Highly encourage you to look at all those papers and where they and how they complement some of our work, both in the AI safety initiative, but also with those on their zero trust journey. So lastly, I just want to, maybe talk a little bit more about future expectations. I do think that adaptive policies are going to be something that is going to be a long-term consideration. We have these access control decisions that are going to evolve as our environments evolve. And instead of the static rules that are revisited after, certain periods of time, policies are going to be continuously made new. They're going to be updating the identities, the devices and workloads and based on these threats. And AI is going to help fine tune these policies so that in these high risk situations, they are treated differently than maybe a low risk one without this constant manually tweaking of the identity and access management rules. And AI can also assist our auditing further by helping to consistently and constantly consume what data is being used and what the risk scores produce and what actions are being taken from that. I think that this is going to build confidence with not only our internal leadership and the security teams, but also our customers, the regulators, and especially because the speed of which this is growing and the acceleration, as I mentioned earlier, of NHI, I think, and the volume of information that is really going to be necessary to be augmented with some form of AI support. I will mention human override also without bottlenecks is the balance that we're going to try to aim for. As I mentioned, humans should be in the loop. They should intervene in critical situations. They should be approving exceptions or and be the ones to confirm the adjustment of policies. But they should not, and I probably should say can't, be required for every decision. We're just moving too quickly. So when humans are used wisely as these governors and reviewers, rather than gatekeepers, I think we're going to achieve both agility and better control overall for our environments. For me, I think of zero trust as this philosophy that helps define what is critical and to be what's critical to be detected and the methods to accomplish that. I think AI is how we are going to do that more dynamically with enhanced analysis, more machine-driven analysis. And then we're going to have resiliency, which is going to build this trust that we are truly protecting. And we can also quickly recover as we have new threats that are able to defeat our security. In 2026, I think you will see a lot from the Cloud Security Alliance on resiliency, both in this research paper I mentioned earlier in Zero Trust, but overall, we see in different industry sectors, especially in financial services, with the development of DORA in Europe, as well as what some of the US regulators are looking at, and in partnership with some of the outages that we've seen in recent months by major cloud providers, I think we are going to have a focus on how do we build and demonstrate more resiliency of critical infrastructure, especially in financial services. And how we're going to be able to demonstrate that is through a good zero trust security posture, through enhancement to address these emerging threats in AI, and in general, just a more focus on how we continuously demonstrate good resiliency. So with that, I appreciate your time listening to me and overall your great support for this event and ongoing work we have in Zero Trust. Hope to see you at our next virtual summit in January when we again are addressing other elements of AI models and agents. And until then, thank you for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day.